Hello and welcome to the Whirly Bloke channel. This is part 2 of my review of the Hawk 5 mini quad from Emax, covering detailed setup of the quad, the XM Plus receiver and the transmitter. Before we do any setup on our quad, we need to set up our radio. I'll run through this fairly quickly.
Welcome to OpenTX.
We need to create a new model, press enter, create model, and we need a quad, and as normal I've got my presets set up, so I just need to page through assigning the various channels. Here we go, press enter, and we need to change the name of this model, which we will call Hawk 5. There we go. A couple of other things that we will set up before we get started. Our failsafe is currently not set. We want that to be no pulses. So just press enter and scroll till you get no pulses. We'll sort out binding the transmitter to the receiver in a minute. And my usual configuration flying, which is my particular way of doing things, and it's entirely up to you how you do this, is I use this switch for my 3 flight modes. So we have acro that way, horizon, and that's a default position there. This is my arm switch, and I tend to use this for the buzzer. So press menu and page to page 4, and we're going to start assigning values. So we pick the first free slot, enter, and we're going to call this mode, which will be my flight mode on this switch here. There we go, scroll down, select the source, and the source is switch SE, exit, 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 there we go, and we will set up the arm switch. I use this one simply because when I'm flying and something happens, I can quickly get to it like that. Now some people don't like the simplicity of this because they might accidentally hit it in flight. I've never done it. It's whatever you're used to, really. So let's select the next free slot, which we will call arm, and the source is going to be SC. That's sorted, and the last switch I'm going to use for the moment is this momentary switch here for the buzzer. There we go, the source is SH. Excellent. So that's set up the inputs. Press page to go to the mixer page, which is sort of like the outputs, and we'll map those inputs to these mixers. First free slot, and we will call this mode. There we go, and the source is already set up to mode, which is the mode input. We don't have to touch that. Next free slot is going to be arm. There we go, oops, and arm was already selected. You can just edit to see that. Arm was already selected here. And the last one set up is the buzzer. Source is input buzz, all sorted. So that's all we need to do for that now. The next thing is to bind the transmitter to the receiver. For this we'll need some power. Which will use the USB power from my computer. And let's just quickly connect this. So this is the USB slot you need to use. Let's just connect that in. The first thing we want to check is the receiver being powered up from USB. I've done a video about this. If it's not, then it's just the way that everything's connected, and you'll probably need to use an external battery. But in this case, I can see that the XM Plus receiver red LED is flashing, so I know there's power on there. So we need to bind, which means we need to get into the bind button, and I think it's probably easiest if we take the top plate off. Yeah, it's much easier with the top plate off. So to bind the receiver to the transmitter, we need to put the transmitter into bind mode. So press menu, page to page 2, and scroll up. And we need to be in D16 mode, channels 1 to 16. And we select bind. 1 to 8 telemetry off is fine. There we are, it's chirping away. Now, this is a little bit difficult to see, but the way we bind is that we need to press this bind button here whilst applying power. So just gently press that down and plug in the USB lead. Now, I can immediately see there's a problem here, so let's just take that out to stop the annoying chirp. If this was binding correctly, we would have a solid green light and we would have a flashing red light, and we've got two solid lights. And what this is telling me, there's not actually anything wrong with this, but what it's telling me is that we are running different versions of the firmware on the receiver to the transmitter. It's a fairly common problem. This transmitter is running EU firmware and the receiver is running international firmware, and the two aren't compatible. So I have actually done another video on how to flash EU firmware onto the receiver to make it compatible with the transmitter. You check this link up here, this will show you how to do it. I will get this apart and update the firmware on this XM Plus so it works correctly with the transmitter. To fix this problem, we're going to need to flash the EU version of the firmware onto this XM Plus receiver. Now, unfortunately, because this XM Plus is actually part of the F4 Magnum Tower, it's soldered on with these interconnect pins, so removing it to put the cables that we need on here to connect it to our Taranis to flash the firmware is going to be too much surgery. So what we're going to do is make up a cable and solder direct to these pins, and just taking a quick look at the instructions here that we came with the Hawk 5. We've got three connectors here which are S-bus, plus 5 volts and ground, and we will connect those using a servo cable. This is just a standard servo cable which you can get anywhere. You may have one kicking around already, but there is a little trick that we have to do. We're going to need to swap over these two cables here. At the moment this goes S-bus, positive, ground, and the way this connects in the back, as you'll see in a moment, is that it actually goes the other way around. So we're just going to swap those over very quickly. It's pretty easy to do. There we go, so they're swapped over. You'll see why in a minute. So we need to solder onto these three pins here, so I'll just use, if we just go in here like this, and the way the connections goes, S-bus, which is going to be white, and 5 volts, which is red, and ground, which is black. You don't have to worry too much about being really good joints, they just need to be connected and not shorted. This is only temporary. Okay, so So when you do this, check and double check the wiring, because you don't want to blow this up. So if you remember, the pins reading down are S bus +5 and ground, which is white, red and black, and we're going to need to connect these into the back of our Taranis. Now I already had a cable. This is my standard cable I use for flashing different receivers, but unfortunately we've got an S-port connector which isn't going to work there. And if we look on the back here, we have got 5 pins. The top 2 aren't used. And running from the bottom, I've already marked these up. This is something I've done quite a few times, so I've actually put it on here. So it goes signal, minus, positive, and that matches up with these. White signal, black minus or ground, and red, which is positive. So we're going to check and double check. So it's red, black, white, white, red, black, which is good. So to get the firmware, the easiest way to do this is if you go to frskyrc.com, go to products, receivers, and we are on the XM series, and it's XM Plus, and we need to go to the download area. Here we go, firmware. Now this download package here is the latest one, end of March 2017, and this includes the key things here are FCC are the international versions, and LBT or listen before talk are the EU versions. So if we download this package here, we will get everything. Just click on that. There we go. Now I'm just going to copy this to the location where I keep all my firmware downloads, XM Plus, and expand this. Obviously if you're using a Windows machine, it's going to be slightly different, but it's the same procedure. We can get rid of that, we don't need it any longer. So here are the firmwares for the various different versions, but we're going to grab that guy there. That's the one that we need, and we need to paste that onto our SD card. So we go to firmwares and paste, and there we are. That's the XM Plus firmware, listen before talk, which is the EU version. So that is now on the SD card on our Taranis. So that's great. We can disconnect our USB and we can exit.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Excellent. So the way we actually do the flashing, we've got our new firmware sitting on the SD card in the back of our Taranis, and we are going to flash it using this cable onto the receiver. So if we connect this up as we had it before, we need signal at the bottom, ground or black negative in the middle, and red, which is power at the top. Check, double check, check, double check. So if you long press the menu key, gets into the radio setup, and hit page, that takes us to page 2 of the menu setup. Scroll down to firmwares, which is where we stored that firmware, and you'll see here, this is the one we just put on here, XM Plus LBT, and that's the latest version. Scroll down, long press enter, and you want to choose flash external device. Just press enter, and there we go. You can see that it's actually powered up the XM Plus. We've got a couple of LEDs flashing here to indicate that the software is being uploaded from the transmitter to the receiver, and we get a progress bar on the screen. We just sit and wait. Excellent, that's done. powered off the receiver, we can disconnect our cable from the back. Fiddly, there we go. And we've now got the latest firmware, hopefully the EU firmware, flashed onto this board. We don't need this connector anymore, so let's just unsolder that. So hopefully now we should be able to successfully bind our transmitter to our receiver. Okay, let's go through this again. Hope we're all okay. So let's turn the transmitter on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
And go to page, scroll up. And again, we are in D16, channels 1 to 16, and we are going to bind. Telemetry off is fine. So that's chirping away. And if you remember, what we need to do is to press and hold the bind switch here while simultaneously connecting power. There we go. Hope you can see this. This is different from last time. If you remember, we had a solid green light and we had a solid red light which indicated it wasn't correctly bound. We've now got a solid green light and a flashing red light which indicates that it has bound. And we can check this by going to our transmitter, pressing exit to take it out of bind mode. We can turn our transmitter off. We can disconnect the power from our quad. Now we need to make sure these aren't too close together. So let's turn our transmitter on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
That's good. Now if we connect power to our board, there we go. The solid green light, we've got no red light, flashing or solid, we've just got a solid green light, which means that these are talking to each other. So flashing the EU version of the firmware onto this board, as I suspected, fixed the problem. So we can now get on and set up our board. So don't do what I just did. I realised this board goes on two ways. So you put it around the wrong way, you're not going to be able to see the VTX channel indicator down here. So there we go, all back together. That's one of those things which you have to do fairly regularly, depending on where you buy your quad or your transmitters and receivers from. You need to be running the same version. And if you check out the video that I've linked up here, that will give you a full explanation of any confusion you might have about why those firmwares need to be identical. So now we know that our quad and receiver are talking to our transmitter, successfully bound, and we can now connect this to our computer and get some setup done. We've got power. Have a quick check. We've got a green light on the XM Plus receiver, which means that it is talking to the transmitter. So we can now go into Betaflight. Let's connect to the quad. That's good. And first things first, let's just check what version of Betaflight we're actually running. 3.2.2, okay, that's last year's. We will probably flash this to 3.3, but for the moment we'll stick with what we've got. So let's just calibrate the accelerometer. Quad is on a flat surface. That's good. And one quick check for orientation, that when we pitch, the graphic goes forwards, backwards. When we roll, it goes left, right, and when we yaw, it goes left and right. So that is correct. Let's check that the receiver is working. We have got pitch, we've got roll, we've got yaw, and we've got throttle. Great. So we'll need to set up our switches now. So we'll just go to modes. Nothing much set up here. The arm switch is set up on aux 2, so let's just see. So So that's correct, arm switch is good, and we're going to be using this switch for our flight mode, so we will add angle mode in, and this will be on aux 1. So in that position, back position, it's in angle mode. Horizon, we'll add that as a range on aux 1, and when it's in its middle position, it is horizon, or angle 1, here we go, angle, horizon, and when it's up they will both be off, and we'll just save that to check that that's working correctly. Angle, horizon, and I also want air mode on when I'm in acro, so if we go here, add range, we are on aux 1, and we want acro to be on when it's in that forward position. So angle, horizon, acro, excellent. So we can put the beeper in, that is on aux 3, that's working. Save. No beeper sound, it's probably because the battery's not connected. So that's all we need to do there. Make sure we save that. Failsafe, we'll just check, and failsafe is set to drop if it's got no transmitter signal, which is perfect. Good, nothing we need to change there. Power battery, I'm not going to worry about that. Configuration, OSD. So let's have a look. All I want is main battery voltage. I don't like all this clutter on the screen. So we get rid of all of those. I'll leave that in the top right. That's perfect. So that's all we need to do for a minimal setup. Let's just disconnect that. Alright, so that's all set up. We can disconnect that from the computer. And what we need to do now is check that this works standalone with a battery. But before we even think about connecting a battery, get your multimeter, put it on resistance or continuity mode, check it works. And don't assume just because this has come out of the factory and it's supplied that there's no shorts or anything going to blow up in here when you connect a battery. It's always better to just check there's no short across the battery connection, and that looks pretty good. So I think it's safe to connect a battery. We haven't got any props on. We've got a VTX antenna connected with this dipole. I think we'll just leave that on for the moment, see how that performs. So let's connect a battery and see what happens. Perfect. So the buzzer is working, and let's see what happens when we arm it. It arms, perfect. So we can do a quick check that the motors are turning in the correct direction. Top ones are turning in, bottom ones are turning in like that. So let's do a quick check. They're going in the right direction, which is perfect. So the next thing we can check is that failsafe is working before we go outside and do a test flight. So let's arm the quad. Perfect. We're flying around. This all sounds fine. And we turn the transmitter off. Exactly what we expect. The motors have stopped and it's beeping the lost model alarm. So we know that failsafe is working. So I think now we are ready to bolt some props on, get a battery strap on, and let's get this out and flying. So we're just going to strap the battery on, but one last thing that I like to do before I go and do a test flight is make sure that everything is screwed up nice and tight. I know the props are good because I've just done those. It's worth just double checking that everything is where it needs to be. One thing that's interesting I've noticed with these props, they are incredibly flexible at the ends. It's going to be interesting to see how they stand up to a few crashes. But, and the angle of pitch on here is incredible. So let's get this battery connected. There we are, ready to go. Let's get this out in the field and give it its maiden flight. So, even with ready-to-fly quads, you can still get some problems. Mismatching international and EU firmware versions is pretty common when you buy stuff from different locations around the world. Although, when I reviewed the Betaflight X150 recently, which uses the same XM Plus receiver, that was already flashed with the EU version. But hopefully, this has shown how easy it is to fix these problems when they happen. And I guess it's really about spotting what the problem is. If you found that useful and you want updates, please like and subscribe to the channel down here. It really does help me make better content. And do let me know what you think about this Hawk 5. I'll see you next time.